Ready?
Ready.
Good morning. This is the New York City Board of Standards and Appeals Public Review Session for April 27, 2015. We'll begin with a special order calendar. Decision items. Item number 1, 120365BZ, 1929 Bruckner Boulevard, Bronx.
Okay. With this one, we asked them to remove signs and banners and so on. They submitted photographs showing that most of the signs were removed, though there are still some banners that show tune-up, brakes, and inspection. I'm not. Those may actually fit within the allowable maximum on the current use, and they're going to come down when the mini mart is installed. So, just to clarify on that. And then there's a pole on which signs had been mounted, and they took the signs off, but the pole's there. So we just need some sort of written assurance that they're going to remove that pole from the site with condition grant on that. And they were also supposed to have submitted photographs showing the planting was in place before tomorrow's hearing. We don't have those. So it might mean that we have to put this off for a week. I don't know. Anybody else on this?
So you want to defer this? New cases, item number 2, 58455BZ, 699 Morris Avenue, the Bronx.
Okay, this is basically a proposal to convert an auto repair to a convenience store. Yeah, and I guess my main question is the site is very small, and there's it's also an extension, or let's say a reinstatement of a variance, essentially.
Madam Chair, can you move your mic down a little bit?
Oh, sorry. It's a reinstatement, essentially, of a previously approved variance for automotive service. My main concern about this is the number of hump islands and the amount of traffic or cars and trucks that could be on this site at the same time. I'm very concerned that the site is very tiny, and its original use only had 2 pumps, so 1 pump island that was close to the structure. And now the proposal is to sort of spread out effectively 4 pumps over this tiny site. So I need more comfort that this is safe. I'd like the fire department to weigh in on this also. And I just want clarification. In 2005, maybe Commissioner Montanez can speak to this, there were soil samples that indicated contamination was found on the site. It seems to be accompanied by a closed spill report from DEC. I just want the applicant to verify the contamination was removed, because that wasn't stated in the statement of facts. And it's kind of trying to figure out what those documents really mean happened on the site. Any other?
Well, usually when the DEC closes a spill report, it means that the spill has been cleaned up. But, they could give us better information about that.
Okay.
Can they also dimension the curb cuts, because the drawings, especially the traffic drawing, shows the traffic flowing into 1 curb cut on the eastern side of the site and 2 on the western, and it'd be nice to see actually how all of that will work, and a dimension curb cut will help us to conceptualize the traffic moving in.
Does anyone else have any comments about the traffic flow?
Well, perhaps they could just explain if they feel that this is a pattern that is going to be acceptable, because it does look a little crowded. Maybe they need to get an engineer on board that has done these sort of traffic flow patterns for gas stations in the past. It looks like he's got a lot of vehicles on the site that just clearly won't fit and won't be able to make turns. So.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I don't know anything about the background of the engineer who submitted this material and whether she has experience designing gas stations, and so we'd like to hear about that, and if not, bring in a specialist to to confirm to us that this is a safe layout. Okay.
Item number 3, 61973BZ, 2940 Cropsey Avenue, Brooklyn.
Okay, this one is a reinstatement of a variance for eating and drinking with accessory drive-through. Just a few comments on this. I'm not really understanding the sign analysis. It states that there's a non-compliance for all signs. I didn't understand why you would offer that there's a non-compliance for all signs. It should analyze as if it's in a C1 district, not an R8. So the sign analysis always says R8, and of course there's a non-compliance because you can't have signs. The proposed curb cut on Bay 52nd, which exists, but it was never permitted, is directly adjacent to residential use. And though that's an extremely busy thoroughfare already, I keep thinking adding a curb cut for what could be a very active commercial use would be adding insult to injury to this one little house or two little houses that are right there. It also looks like to me that it could interfere with the traffic that's coming off the Bell Parkway or onto it. I'm not exactly sure which way the traffic pattern works. I personally think it should rely on the Cropsey curb cuts, which worked in the prior application. I'm not sure why it wouldn't work now. The layout of the reservoir spaces also looks like the Bay 52nd Street curb cut is the preferred entry, so then it's even more traffic. It sounds like they're really encouraging everyone to go that way, which would be, I think, the biggest nuisance. Just some notes, the number of the parking spaces should be numbered on the plans. There should be a planting plan that specifies the number and types of vegetation, and the perimeter next to the residential must be fully screened with high shrubs, and the plans should be specific how many and what type of shrub. And then, other than along the residential property line, it's not clear to me if there's fencing proposed along Bay 52nd and 53rd. The drawings really need to clarify using a clear symbol to delineate the fencing. It's really, I actually couldn't tell what was a property line, what was a fence, what was a curb. And also, there's a sort of a planting strip, say, code that's used, but it's not clear what that is. There's sort of little X's to indicate a planting area, but is that grass? Is that ground cover? Is that shrubs? What is that? It needs to be specific. It says in the statement of facts that a menu board enunciator wasn't specified yet. It needs to be specified so we know that there's an automatic delimiter that changes for nighttime use. And the statement of facts says that the plans show the parking complies with C1 zoning, but there are no calculations or other compliance notes provided. The zoning sheet shows that there are 50 spaces required when 23 spaces are provided, so something needs to be clarified. And since there is no tenant yet, I just wonder when is the work that's described going to be done, since the site has been in a state of abandon for several years, and obviously it's an eyesore. Any other?
I had sort of similar comments. Their layout doesn't work concerning the reservoir spaces because they've got an in and out on, I guess it's 52nd. And it looks like the reservoir spaces actually, people are backed up. You can't get out if you're heading out towards 52nd, so they need to rearrange that. Plus, I think we could use a little more discussion on the intensity of use, because instead of just one operation, they're really asking us for two separate operations, two different users, right? So they're splitting the building in half and two separate users. So one might have, a very easy, calm use, but the other might be more intense, or both might be very intense, and they don't really discuss that. And yeah, I think they need to talk about additional parking and why they, they think it's okay not to have that. And ditto on the landscaping. I think they need to be a little more definitive, exactly what they're planning on putting in.
Can they also, on the plans, put the dimensions from the menu board to the nearest residential buildings? So we can see how far that would be.
Yeah, I was most concerned about the proposed 2 uses on the site. There are prior variance was only for 1 store, so that would double the amount of signage. And I didn't understand how the menu board and drive-through would work with the two separate stores involved. So it's a little unusual.
Okay.
Appeals calendar, decision items. Item number 4, 21814A, 4603 88th Street and 45th Avenue, Queens.
Okay, they provided a revised site plan and a zoning chart, and I don't know that we needed anything else. I think we had requested a pavement plan, but it seems like that site plan shows, it's not official builder's pavement plan, but DOB will require that. I thought it was adequate for our purposes. Anybody else?
No.
Okay.
Continued hearing items. Item number 5, 12814A, 47 East 3rd Street, Manhattan.
I have to recuse.
So, this up here. The applicant provided submissions on March 24th and April 14th discussing the issue of how to portray a novel accessory use, and the applicant discussed that the zoning resolution contemplated the accessory use of a loading berth, and in the absence of a showing of common or habitual, loading berths are required, of course, under 2572 for hospitals and medical facilities over 10,000 square feet. And it was not out of the realm of possibility to consider that the same need for a smaller facility might be appropriate. The applicant also pointed to case law that would suggest that functional similarity of use may be considered in addressing accessory use, and that the case law, Delwood Dairy, stands for the acceptance of a similar use theory. Therefore, a loading berth is functionally similar to parking space. And the applicant further discusses that the doctor's office is cited to provide care to an underserved community, and that gurney access to the lower level would be difficult. DOB responded on April 7th to the board's question concerning appropriateness of ambulance services, and that ambulance access is a distinct use from parking under the zoning resolution. And DOB answers that the zoning resolution uses the terms loading for goods and parking for people. Ambulance access, like an ambulance parking bay, is just a prohibited parking space by another name. And that New York Botanical Garden is distinguishable from this appeal, and it supports the distinction between parking and loading. And ambulance access, where it is a use under the zoning resolution, would still not be clearly incidental to and customarily found in the medical office. Do we have any comments about what was submitted?
Well, I thought they have not shown that there is ever a case of a loading dock associated with a medical office, but I think it has been shown by both parties that there's frequently a discharge area where a vehicle can park and discharge/unload a handicapped patron, and that this location does not need to be sheltered. No one argued that the area had to be sheltered, which would be one reason to have it, in the garage area. So I would think that an on-street designated discharge area for the doctor with a drop curb for wheelchair access would be equivalent to many of the examples we saw provided by both the appellant and the Department of Buildings, because these discharge areas were not sheltered.
I'm not finding the appellant's arguments very convincing. I feel that it's really based on their stretching the definition of loading zone to assume the function of an off-street parking space in order to bolster its argument, and I don't find that convincing. I think that the two of them are very separate, and I think that the Department of Buildings has done a very good job in showing the separation of the two definitions in the zoning resolution and also in practice. So I'm inclined to agree with the Department of Buildings arguments.
I would have to say that I found DOB's argument compelling. I do believe that there is a distinction between a loading berth and a parking space. And, unfortunately, I don't think that the appellant was able to show us definitively that this would be sort of a case of first impression, shall we say, or a novel, novel use. So I think that's about it.
Right.
Okay.
Item number 6, you ready? Mm-hmm. Okay. 18014A, 332 West 44th Street, Manhattan.
Okay. So the reason we wanted to reopen this is because the Department of Buildings submitted all new material to us, and we didn't think it was right to have a decision without having some discussion. It wouldn't have been, just wouldn't have made sense. What the Department of Buildings did was they researched deeper into what was going on the site and learned that that the proposed word of Bravo is in a color and in a typeface, and I'll talk about the typeface a little bit more, that actually matches the logo that is long held by ParkFast products. So I find that this is a much better argument. And for me, though, it points out the DOB does engage in serious fishing, looking for ways to render text a sign. The argument that they bring now stays close to home. It's on the site itself. It points directly to other activities, in this case, a commercial advertising campaign that are taking place on the site itself and is directly related to the site's business activity. So, so what it's doing for me is it's making the necessary nexus now. I'm sorry that it comes so late in the hearing process. I wish that DOB had done its homework earlier. But I do want to say that DOB should be steering clear of fabricated links to off-site conditions and stay on-site when it analyzes whether text is a sign. Does the text refer to more than just the text itself? In this case, I really believe that it refers to the ParkFast logo and the ad campaign, and we can easily imagine other yellow Helvetica words on ParkFast garages that create an amusing and direct linkage to the joy of parking. I note in passing that after some research that ParkFast is the child of the same people who brought us the brilliant ad campaign for Manhattan Mini Storage. And so I'm imagining, now that I see that there's the direct linkage, we didn't see that before, between the logo and the word Bravo. I can see that it could be the beginning of a very interesting ad campaign that we would all kind of honor because it's so brilliant, but then it's therefore a sign. Prior to this submission, I had thought that DOB's overreaching to connect this word Bravo to Times Square in the theater district excuse me, was a good opportunity to also discuss DOB's apparently unfettered restriction on the use of words in public art. But as this Bravo is most certainly a link to ParkFast branding efforts, I think we will need to wait for a case about text and art to discuss this further. So so be it, from my point of view.
Yeah, I think, well, DOB pointed out that it's only about this particular proposal and this particular location, and to speculate about other things is not really relevant. So, yeah, I agree with you.
I agree with everything that the chair said.
As do I.
It's another day for art.
Item number 7, 315 14A 45 7th Avenue, Manhattan.
Okay, sorry. So we received the drawings, which the cover letter says, we received drawings from, that were submitted to the LPC. The cover letter says they were perforated, but actually the drawings that I received were not perforated. So we just need to verify that. Also, the cover letter should state that the drawings are the same as the proposed for the MDL waiver. This could be done 1, 2, 3, right? So I don't want to hold up anything. We received the C of A that's dated April 16th. They revised the shadow study, so I think it's much clearer in showing the incremental shadow impact of the addition on the inner court. It shows the shadow impact is minimal. Now you can actually measure it and count the floors and see how wide the shadow is. And, if there was another layer that showed how the shadow kind of moves down slowly, that would have been interesting to see, like at what point it's at its deepest or where it is at midday or something. But I think there was enough information to get a good idea. I just note, though, I'm not sure why it was revised like that for LPC, but the plans at the rooftop addition were revised to eliminate the 4 sleeping rooms from that level. So now there's no sleeping rooms that actually rely on that court. It's just public space that's surrounding it. But I guess I go back to that the shadow impact doesn't seem to be significant. So with having that addition, the plans show that, as requested, the MDL required lighting in the court. The light and air easement, as requested, was replaced by a restrictive deck. They added a discussion in the statement of facts regarding the preservation area, the zoning district. I'm just curious, though, there was a reduction in the number of hotel rooms from 634 to 618. Just wanted to comment on that. They did clarify in the statement of facts the removal of most but not all of the court infill to accommodate this project, and that the inner court will be fully glazed with curtain walls, so the window openings facing onto it are much larger than the original building. There's a sentence in the statement of facts that I don't understand. I think it might have been a mistake. It says the inner court will meet the required light and ventilation requirements of the MDL and the building code. That's why we're here, it doesn't. So I think maybe it was that the rooms would have the required amount of opening, but that's never clearly stated in the statement of facts. It's kind of hinted at, and I just kind of know that they're probably hinting because I know that that's a rule, but nobody's actually said it anywhere. And so I think that we're probably good here, and I think we said that if it was a good submission, we could close and grant, right? So if they could respond to those and other comments quickly, we could actually do that.
I had no further comments. I thought it was a good submission.
Right, me too.
And you were okay with the
I am
financial?
fine. Yeah.
Okay, great.
Zoning calendar, decision items, 14714BZ, 4167 Ocean Avenue, Brooklyn.
Okay. They submitted revised plans that show the side yard compliance and rear yard dimensions, but they didn't address the floodplain issue, though the cover letter says they do. Did you see something?
There's a little note at the bottom of the plan that says what the floodplain is, but it's the incorrect floodplain.
Oh, oops.
They say it's NAVD 88.8.66, and the floodplain is NAVD 88.11.
Oh.
So I had asked the plan examiner to have them corrected. It's just a note on the side, and then all the elevations are in NAVD 88.
Oh, they are?
So you can see that the first floor is almost 13 feet.
Okay, so we're effectively
As long as
good.
they just change that one thing.
Okay. And in any event, it's certainly would condition approval on DOB's review of flood regulations.
Right.
But it doesn't sound like the project will need to be modified to adjust height, so
Right.
we're good. Okay. And they did provide a 1950 Sanborn showing the floor plate unchanged since then and revised the statement of facts. It's still kind of a, let's say, low-energy statement of facts, but I think it does the job for what we need. So I think we're okay with that one comment.
Continued hearing items, item number 9, 15311BZ, 2711 30th Avenue, Queens.
They requested a 6-week adjournment to make corrections on site. So actually, yeah, so we'll do a submit in 6 weeks as opposed to a hearing in 6 weeks. Because it's actually work on site.
Item number 10, 30913BZ, 965 East 24th Street, Brooklyn.
Okay, I'm still seeing a reduction in the side yard around the bay window area to 8 feet, when the maximum allowable is 9 feet. It's not really just the bay window, right? I think it's the, the statement of fact says there was a change there, but there actually hasn't been a change from the original plan to the latest submission with respect to that. So I'm not understanding, there seems to be a disconnect between maybe what the architect said he was going to do and what actually was done. The proposal now is to pull the building forward 2 feet to leave 17 feet in the front yard, which is still permitted, and 23 feet in the rear yard at the first and second floors, and pull the third floor back further. There's no dimension shown on that third floor pullback. It should be close to the 30-foot line, because there's no reason why not, given that that's storage. But just to add that the rear photos show that the adjoining buildings probably line up with the 25-foot rear yard that the existing building has. So even this little extra 2 feet is an imposition, but at least it's pulling it back and respecting more what's going on at the adjoining properties. With respect to the building height, in this submission, they didn't respond at all to the request to bring the floor-to-ceiling height down since at 35 foot 8 inches, this house is nearly 6 feet taller than all the houses on the streetscape that was provided. And they didn't provide an explanation for why that 4-foot high area above the attic can't be brought down, since the roof line is flat, or almost flat. So it's kind of like this, like a barn roof. And it seems like you could then slide the barn roof down and you wouldn't be affecting the height of the rooms inside. Because the rooms inside have a clean 8 foot, it looks to me. So I think the fastest way to deal with this, again, would be to bring the architect to discuss, and we can understand what the technical issues are, and maybe finish this up. Okay. Julia?
Item number 11, 814BZ, 1824 East 22nd Street, Brooklyn.
Unless I'm mistaken or there's a mistake on the filing, nothing's been submitted on this application since March 16th, which was an adjournment request.
Do we
Nothing
have an
new.
adjournment for this week?
We didn't get an adjournment letter as far as I can tell. So this would make it the 4th adjournment, which by sort of in-house policy means we take it off the calendar until you're ready. No, no prejudice. It's just why keep having these adjournments. Yeah. Okay.
Item number 12, 4114BZ, 21-37 Waverly Avenue, Brooklyn.
Okay. They provided revised plans showing some changes to be made to bring the building up to fire code. They show the existing abandoned elevator shaft will be repurposed as a passenger elevator. However, I'm not convinced that DOB will find that access to it through fire stairs meets ADA clearance requirements or fire code, since one door swings out and blocks the other one. So if you had actually a wheelchair there in the event of a fire, oh, I hate to think. And there's actually 3 doors opening into that fire exit. So I think that they'll require a direct access from that corridor to the street, which probably means opening a new door, which really wouldn't be that big of a deal. In any event, because of the occupancy of this building for all of this time without approvals, I really do think we need to have DOB review the plans for fire code compliance before we move on. And I would like to discuss, which we could do now or at hearing, whether the work that's shown on the drawings needs to be done prior to approval, since I'm not convinced the work will be done after approval. They did show fire alarm detector and sprinkler plans, which show that there are already systems in place and that the systems just need to be beefed up in order to meet what I guess is 2014 code requirements. So also that work should probably be done prior to grant, so we know that everything's in place, and will, you know, DOB would accept an alteration application to just improve fire egress. You don't need to have it be for a school. They'd be delighted if you improve fire ratings. And then the revised plans don't include improvements to the facade, as was shown on an earlier submission, that the set needs to be coordinated to make sure that the final set has the aesthetic improvements to the facade. Can't just drop out into, you know, ideal that dropped out. We did receive a letter from DEP with conditions, and the environmental consultant must respond to the DEP requests. Also, as a reminder, we still need air quality and noise sign-off. The school did do an indoor air photoionization test that DEP is still reviewing, and the noise test showed attenuation needed at Washington Avenue. That attenuation information needs to be on the drawings, and it will be a condition of approval. I could read the DEP requirements, but it will take some time. But the consultant has to respond to all of the DEP requests. Anything else on this?
Just to reiterate the issue concerning the fire safety and the sprinkler plans, I would like to see them file for the additional work that they need to do and to get that done before we would grant. It looks like they have some work to do, so I just want them to start it, get it done.
Anybody else? Okay.
Item number 135914BZ, 122 Jackson Street, Brooklyn.
An adjournment was requested without specific dates, so more to follow.
Item number 146414BZ, 1320 East 23rd Street, Brooklyn.
Yeah, this is like the other application. We haven't had a submission, which was for an adjournment, since March 16th. Again, this would be the 4th adjournment. So we'll, again, take this off the calendar without prejudice, and when you're ready, give us a call.
Item number 14814BZ, 11 Avenue A, Manhattan.
Okay. So this one, they revised the plan to provide simplex units and a passenger elevator. However, now it's a 6-story building as opposed to a 4-story plus mezzanine. The new requested FAR is 4.4. Let's see. So now the problem for me is because we're looking at neighborhood character, that's what we have to look at. And even though it's on Avenue A, oddly, it's a part of Avenue A. Well, actually, a lot of the Lower East Side has that kind of condition, even on the wide streets, of very low buildings. and the buildings in this area are 5 stories at most on both sides of the block going up the street. That's actually Avenue A's character. So I did, and I'm no finance expert, but I did some back of the napkin calculations, and it looked to me that since the construction costs for the extra the sixth floor are about $250,000, it seems that if you took off that 6th floor, the number, because that's less expense, the numbers would still work. I might feel different about this if this was like an amazing design, so it's like a real asset to the neighborhood and everyone would go, ooh, did you see that new building on Avenue A? But it's about as pedestrian and ugly, frankly, a design as you could come up with. So that's hardly an asset, and this should be what's fondly called a background building, so not taller than its neighbors. If we're going to talk about neighborhood character. The statement of facts needs to be amended because it makes an actually kind of a funny argument. It says that the proposed units, it says that in the as-of-right, the as-of-right units are too large to be marketable in this area. But in fact, the proposed units are the same size or larger than the as-of-right. So that doesn't work for an argument that the units aren't marketable. Need to fix that argument. And I'll just talk very briefly about the financial analysis. I just have to say it doesn't make it easy to figure things out. We're used to much more backup. There are no backups for the comps, no support for soft cost assumptions. The cap rates are unevenly applied to the as-of-right versus the proposed without explanation. The SWIFT analysis is so basic as to be of questionable value. I know it's been used here, but I frankly don't understand it as a person who did rely on takeoffs. The only thing I can say about it is at least the method is applied to both as-of-right and proposed, so even if it's inaccurate, it's the same inaccurate square footage for development. So even though it's totally can't be true that that's the amount, that's the development cost in New York, at least it's the same development cost. So just in the future for this consultant, there should be real cost estimators by real cost estimates by real cost estimators who do takeoffs. How much sheetrock, how many studs, all that stuff. Anybody else?
I thought the M&O costs, maintenance and operation for this proposal compared to the as-of-right was over double. I couldn't understand if they could give us some detail on that. And it was like the total annual rent for one of the apartments was just M&O costs. Mm-hmm. And if they reduced the height of the building and eliminated the elevator, would that be enough of a cost saving in addition to removing some of the height of the new construction cost to make it more profitable? Because the elevator seems to really encumber the retail space significantly.
But the elevator's required if you have ADA. That was what we talked about the last time. Once it's more than a 2-family house.
Oh, you need the ADA.
You need the elevator.
Well,
right?
Couldn't they have the elevator entrance sort of in parallel with the stairs instead of encumbering into the store? Because it really reduces the width of the store at a certain point to make it, sort of unworkable.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
I had asked them at the original hearing to do a better job of distinguishing themselves from their neighbor, which is perhaps an even smaller site than theirs, and they did not do anything to address that. I do understand that you don't have to be the only property in the neighborhood that suffers from a unique hardship. However, if you do have a property right next door to you, you should at least mention that property and try and distinguish yourself. I did a little bit of research to try and figure out what was going on for the next property, and I believe the property next door is a mixed-use residential and commercial, and so I think their whole argument is that they are small and they don't have residential and didn't have it as, prior to 61 or prior to any zoning changes, but they really should just answer my question and put it in there. It just makes their argument stronger.
That it? Great.
Item number 16, 18614BZ, 5163 Bond Street, Brooklyn.
Okay. So this submission was very complete and clear, clearly responding to questions from the last hearing, and I just want to say I really appreciate that. A pleasure when you get something that's clear and responsive. The proposed plans show the kitchen elevator bulkhead in the required 20-foot setback. I think that kitchen elevator was added. There used to be just one elevator in that neighborhood, and now there are two. I don't really understand what the function of the second one is, but not questioning that. I just don't think that a bulkhead is a permitted obstruction in a rear yard. So not sure about that. And also, there's no information about its height and so on. So that could be a real imposition on the neighbors. The whole point was to clear away from the neighbors that 20 feet. They did provide a very clear zoning analysis and also a version with 12 stories and the ballroom at the top. And the elevators in effectively what is the only workable location, since the tunnel prevents the pit location from being more or less anywhere except within the rear yard setback and except for this one spot that they selected. And if we were to, for instance, waive the rear yard setback, then we're back to imposing on the neighbors, which was the whole idea of keeping that clear. So the construction cost reduction to relocate the ballroom to the top is 1.3 million, but results in a 28-room reduction. And the removal of the ballroom entirely nets a 2.18 million savings without a loss of rooms, but that has a huge impact on the project's viability. They provided an explanation of the back of house and adjacency requirements with respect to all of those kinds of functions to justify the need for so many back of house spaces and why the board's proposed rearrangements would not be feasible. We did ask for elevations of the sides of the buildings. We only have street frontages. We really need the sides in particular. We need the sides anyway, but the neighbors asked about it in particular because they're going to be directly affected. They did provide a much clearer comparison of the other properties to this site with respect to impact of the subway tunnel on those improvements. And I just want to add that there's a requirement for that an archaeological study be done, and therefore we would need a restrictive deck on the archaeological study because that's part of the environmental review. Because there's an archaeological guess, I guess, of significance. So I'm okay with this, even though it's a large FAR increase. But I do see the site is really odd, and and I don't see where the essential items go, and the neighborhood can handle the height. So it's not like FAR means that much in respect to neighborhood character because there are large buildings all over here. So,
Well, I found that they were very good at addressing many of the issues that I had, like you said, in terms of the adjacencies and why that was actually cutting out what could be prime retail space. I thought that explanation was actually very good. And I asked them for an explanation or some sort of proof that the meeting and event space actually has an effect on the projected average daily rate. And they actually did a nice study that talked about all of the different amenities in each hotel and showed the differential in income from each hotel at various periods throughout the year. And then what I thought was actually clinching their argument was when they showed the side-by-side comparison of the Sheraton and the Aloft Hotel, which are actually located next to each other, and showed how the one with all of the different amenities, including ballroom and event space, had higher rack rates than the next-door neighbor. So I'm actually fine with this.
great.
I just had asked them to modify the unencumbered excavation, sheeting, blah, 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 costs because they had only excavated down to 14 feet below grade, and really, the as-of-right plans show 20 feet below grade, and they didn't, I don't believe they corrected that.
I have nothing further. I was very satisfied, actually, with their submission, answered my questions from the last hearing.
Okay, great. So I think if we could just get that information in, we could, what are we doing? Closing this? Yeah, we could close this, and if you got it in really fast, we could even maybe do a closed grant with permission. I don't know. Okay. Okay. So anyway, it needs to be like instant work, and maybe that's not enough time, but let's see. I know that the side elevations exist, because you don't design a building without elevations. So, so if we could get that in, but, okay, so let's see what happens tomorrow. Okay.
Item number 17, 238-14BZ, 9800 Franklin Street, Manhattan.
Okay, with this one, the statement of facts removed as requested the reference to the historic district as a hardship and described the history of the side alley, which, you know, that the cutting of 6th Avenue caused an enormous amount of havoc on so many sites, so it's just another one of the victims of that. The submissions, with respect to the submissions to establish the site's uniqueness, one was a chart of other sites with frontage to the subway tunnel, expressed in terms of ratio of lot area to frontage. The other was a map showing closer proximity here of the subway to the site where the subway turns. If there was a submission showing other triangular sites in the area, these were illegible. That's what I saw. All the area maps were illegible in the submission. The only thing you could see was the locations. You couldn't see what you were supposed to be seeing. You need to compare this site to the size of other sites and to their configuration to make that unique. The triangle, or the bow tie shape, is the critical thing. It's not just the proximity to the subway, it's that it's a bow tie. Show us that there are no other bow ties. So since this hasn't been done, the only demonstrated unique condition is a subway proximity. I note that the letter that was written in response to the opposition's letter does pull all of those arguments for uniqueness together, but I've not seen the backup to substantiate this. They provided an alternate plan, placing the open space at the corner of the site, at the apex of the triangle at White and 6th Avenue. This turns out to not be a complying development since it would not comply with street wall regulations. It wasn't clear from the submission whether this version complies with lot coverage regs. So, the submission was kind of open-ended. It's just, again, another floating piece of paper. If yes, they should have discussed the feasibility of layouts of units in the statement of facts. If this were an alternative to the proposed, an alternative as a lesser variance alternative. Maybe it's not a lesser variance, therefore, what's the difference, right? It is noteworthy that that if the alternative were the plan, there would be fewer piles to install, so it'd be a cheaper site to construct. So that kind of stuff should be discussed. I noted in the prior hearing that including premium costs for the facade, due to it being in a historic district, is disingenuous given the location in upscale Tribeca, where a high-end facade is a market expectation. If this were not in a historic district, you'd still have, the fanciest architects designing the fanciest facades. We see it up the street, not in a historic district. However, given the premium costs for all the other things, I don't think the high-end facade will have a significant impact on the return. So it's something that should be corrected, but I don't think it's significant. In general, I thought there was much too much reliance about what the LPC approval, what LPC approved or might approve. The zoning resolution, section 7221 for the variance, has its own neighborhood character findings, and the arguments should focus on that. This applies to both the alley and the street wall continuity to the triangle apex. So it shouldn't be, LPC won't let us do it, it should be, what is the neighborhood character here, and is it consistent with neighborhood character if you cut off that big portion at the apex. They did provide a plan showing the location of piles that need to be installed from the street. That was helpful. They revised the land value and sale comps, and the values went up. However, it's difficult to determine if residential units if the residential units that were used are comparable, since no plans were provided or amenities described. The land sale prices were skewed upward this time by the inclusion of 2 new sites. They provided a cost estimator as requested, a cost estimate as requested by an independent estimator. As a result, the cost went up, but that means they're probably more realistic. The as of right is $1 million more costly than the proposed. There was this time, which is one reason for the delay, there was an opposition submission where they had an appraiser who's actually not familiar with the strange BSA financial analytical method. Their appraiser, which did a real classic appraisal, used the actual sale value of the site, but that's actually, the BSA method is to use market value, and discount for site specifics, but not for the hardships. They found different average apartment comps, but they didn't take into account that these apartments in the as of right are very strange. So they probably wouldn't be as valuable as the ones that they're using for comps that are in these magnificent buildings and are laid out like normal apartments. This thing is sort of to say a horseshoe would be generous. It's like they're really strange layouts in the as of right. The analysis, the opposition's analysis did point out correctly that the report by the applicant doesn't have backup to justify the discounts, and doesn't support comparability with adequate data about each comp, such as photos and floor plans. The subject of discounts for me is really strange. I mean, an area could be 12,000 square feet against a 4,000 square foot, and it gets a 1% deduction, and then the exact same comparison to a 7,000 square foot gets a 1% deduction. We really need to start having some backup for how come these things are discounted the way they are. Sometimes they're not discounted because 4,000 is close enough to 12,000.
Right, I agree with you. I think that the adjustments are always so subjective, and they don't often make sense one against another. And so actually that was one of my comments as to the site value and how it was increasing. So, but I'll let you finish before I
Well,
talk.
but just to, that report by the appraiser, what was nice about that, because that's a classic appraisal where they're required to go through all of their methods, right? The appraisal actually explains how they're making discounts, what the analysis is to make a discount. So at least you have some idea upon what that's based, whereas we don't see that in these reports, and I find that a big problem. Then the applicant's financial analyst submitted a rebuttal to the appraisal, which describes the BSA and analytical method, which is different, and reminds that it doesn't include entrepreneurial and bulk investors' profit, and then again about the market value. But in spite of all that, there's a lot of loose ends on the application. So this is an application where, had the applicant just been tighter in putting together things, just like deciding to knit and to really carefully review, we could be finished, really, it seems to me. But instead, there's so many loose ends, I don't know how to say, okay, let's forget the loose ends. But in spite of the loose ends, it seems to me clear that this shallow split bow tie lot with only 4,000 square feet in total, 4,100 square feet, adjacent to a subway tunnel that requires construction of 2 buildings instead of 1, and with significant costs associated with the tunnel's proximity, is a unique lot and suffers economic hardship in a way that other lots don't. So, and the requested waiver to bring the street wall to the street line, as it should be for neighborhood character, is minimal. And the side yard waiver brings light and air to adjoining properties, where a perfectly valid option would have been no side yard at all. So having a concession to neighbors is something you don't see that often in developments. And so I don't actually have any problem with the application, except that the materials need to be tied up.
I agree with you. I think that they definitely have a legitimate case for a unique hardship. However, when you look through the report, at least for me, when I focused in on the financials, when you see changes made and you don't see the attention to detail in terms of explaining why you made the changes, then I spend more of my time trying to figure out whether or not you're trying to put one over on me than seeing actually that the big picture is that there is a hardship and they are deserving of some sort of variance. So for instance, when I make a comment that the site value should be adjusted by taking out a site that actually has a viable building on it, I'm expecting that that means that the site value is going to go down. But then what ends up happening is that other sales that I had no issue with get pulled out. New sales are inserted that to me do not seem to be comparable at all in terms of size. And I'm talking about sales 1 and 2, which is 89 Bowery Street and 5 Essex Street being removed and being replaced with 87 Chambers and 140 Avenue of Americas, which happen to be much larger than the subject, and one of which is actually an older sale than the original sales that were in there. I end up scratching my head and saying to myself, is this just a way to beef up the site value? So I'm losing sight of the bigger picture, and that's not good. Same thing when I look at the new report with the new base construction costs, and I see that those costs were increased between $2 and $2.5 million overall, and that's just the base construction cost. And there isn't any narrative that follows that says we're looking at it because we're looking at a new source for construction costs, and as a result, this has increased, that has increased, this has increased for a total increase of $2 million. I end up saying, well, I don't really know what's going on, and that takes the application much longer to get to a resolution.
Great.
I would just like them to do a little bit more investigation of the unusual lesser variance. You know, they seem to be relying on landmarks approval a lot, and besides just reducing the pile costs, it would reduce MTA costs, excavation costs. It would provide a more regular layout for the dwelling units. So I think it could have a lot of impact, and I don't really think they've argued the point well enough as far as the C finding in terms of why that, and B finding in terms of why that one doesn't work.
Okay. Okay, right. Need to tighten this whole thing up to make a good argument. That's the problem, because it's such an obvious encumbered site, and so the application should have been neat and clean, and instead it's like all over the place, and that's a shame. So, okay.
New cases, item number 1, 23714 BZ, 16201 Jamaica Avenue, Queens.
Okay, with this one, this is a legalization. We have Department of Investigation and Fire Department sign off, but because this is a legalization, and we had a specific, bless you, a specific request from the fire department, we need you to provide proof of sprinkler system installation, testing, and sign off. And the fire department requests confirmation that the interior fire alarm system is functional and has been tested and approved by DOB and fire department inspection unit. My other question is, where do people park? How do they arrive at this gym? That wasn't mentioned at all. Is it Are these local people come by walk and come by train, or is this a place where people drive? Anybody else?
The only C of O for this building is from 1946 for transient parking, and at some point, they constructed a building. But the building has no C of O. They have 15 open violations. 4 of them are for zoning.
Oh.
And I just need some explanation of
Yeah.
that.
I sort of had the same issue. I was wondering, how did they even get a sprinkler system in there or fire alarm when they don't really have a building that they can attribute it to?
That's
It's
what you
like,
found
why is-
on BIS. so
Why
maybe-
hasn't this building, I don't know when they built it, sometime in the 90s or something, but it has
never
no
got
C
a
of
C.
O. They never got a
They
C of
never got
O.
their C of O.
And it's very suspicious when they have zoning violations.
Okay, so it's possible that on BIS, the C of O is, located in another place someplace. Did you see that there was
From what I could see,
an
the only...
application?
No, I didn't look for that.
Okay.
But there was only one C of O on file, and that was for transient parking in 1946.
Right. No, it's just sometimes, because like we did have that in another case, that strange site where there was parking off-site and there was no C of O, but
Right.
eventually it turned up.
Also, does this PCE have ADA access? Or how does it work? That's my question. I have to look at the
I
plan.
think it has a little part plan in the lower left-hand corner that shows there's an elevator and a stair directly from the street.
Right, but that's not the main entrance to the PCE.
I think it's
So
the
someone
main-
has to be able to, like,
No, I think it's
ring
the
a
main
bell?
entrance underneath the canopy.
Oh, there is a
There's a
canopy on
little
that side?
canopy and a stair and an elevator right there, I think,
Oh,
if I'm remembering correctly.
I thought the main entrance to the PCE was on Jamaica Avenue, and the elevator is this little side door around the corner.
On the other side.
And I didn't know if it had any signage or if it was open.
Okay, so maybe we just need clarification, because it's a little part plan that doesn't tell you where you are on the part plan.
And did they go to the community board?
Right, we don't have a community board.
No.
And I just had the same question about the building that Commissioner Montanez had. How did they get a fire alarm system in there if they didn't have a real building to put it in? Maybe it's under a different VIN number.
That's what I
or
think.
something like that. But just a cursory look on this, and I agree, I was sort of perplexed. But
Okay. Yep.
Item number 2, 284-14BZ, 267 Pacific Street, Brooklyn.
Okay, like so many of these, this is a legalization. It doesn't say so in statement of facts. The website shows they opened in December, so the statement of facts needs to change that. So as a result, they need to provide proof that a sprinkler system was installed, tested and signed off, and the fire department, and same applies with this one for the fire department, that they need proof that the interior fire alarm system is functional, has been tested and approved by DOB and fire department inspection unit. But other than that, I was okay. This is a very quiet use, like a ballet studio. We love the ballet
Barman.
studios. You're supposed to wear socks when you go.
Yeah, my only question was whether they have any amplified music or amplified instruction.
I think they did say that they have instruction, but they have amplification, but that the music has to be low because the instructors are calling out instructions, and more like a yoga studio, they're not using mics.
Okay.
It's Tchaikovsky, it's not.
What'd you say?
Nothing. He said it's Tchaikovsky in French.
Oh, because it's called bar class, yes.
Really.
Bar R-E. And this is bar, this is more like
Like
where you go
Gotcha.
drinking after you work out. Okay.
Item number 3, 1-15BZ, 150 West 85th Street, Manhattan.
Okay. This one is for the addition to, let's see, an existing building that had been used as the Madison School of Music and the new school, and now will be used by the Manhattan Day School. We need, on the A finding, we need more. Why is this building that was used to date as a school for Manus and the new school, which of course are for adults, so it's a different group of people, why is this building obsolete for lower school use, for for elementary and high school and so on? So the one, for example, the Manus and the new school moved out for some reason. So maybe it wasn't working for them. Why is that? We also need to understand better what the existing school's curriculum is. As the statement of facts assumes we know it. We don't know it. Are there, I understand that there's one class per grade and the new school will offer 2 classes per grade, but what else? What else is offered there? And it would be great if the statement of facts would walk us through what the existing school has, what it decides it needs besides just more classrooms. They need to provide the backup for the room standards, not just the citations. So it's great that there are citations to why the rooms are that size, but we actually need to see the backup, most of the time, which has actually room sizes on it. We need clarity that the existing building is legal non-complying as to floor area, front setback, rear yard, and rear yard obstruction. The short form EAF needs to be corrected because there's a box checked for office building, not an office building. DOT requested that a safe route plan be developed for students walking to the school, so if we could get that. I'd like some more explanation about the little flex space on the 3rd floor that holds 26 students in that hall area, in part because it says that the flex space is used for communal dining and things like that, or more communal. And since a classroom basically has 26 students in it, how is that communal? I didn't really understand how it's used. The statement of facts should also discuss the difference in room sizes and the split of the 7th and 8th grades between the as of right and the proposed. And I note it should also explain why it's okay, if it's not okay to split the third grade and the 7th and 8th grade, why it's okay to split the kindergarten? Or is that just sort of a necessary evil? You know, you can't have them all together, but at least you have more together. We need the height of the Brandeis School, which is adjacent, only floors were provided. There's only, in this application, there's only a modest increase in height for only the art and science classrooms, and they're located at the front of the building, so you are seeing the height, even though it's set back. The backup on the statement that the extension of the cellar, I need backup on the statement that the extension of the cellar is infeasible. There's an unexcavated
Right, they
portion.
say that there would require rock excavation. I wanted to know if they had a boring or anything.
Right. And we note that there seems to have been a mistake in the notice, that there's supposed to be a 20-day notice, and apparently only 19 days were provided. And since there's a notice requirement of 20 days, I think you actually need to renotice and advise the neighbors that the hearing will be at 10 o'clock and not at 1 o'clock, right? Because it'll be a morning calendar. Anybody else?
I just had a couple of questions to add on to. I didn't understand completely why the as of right wouldn't have worked in terms of their layout. It seems to me that there might have been some adjustments they could have made that would have enabled them to have more classrooms in a way that they needed for their proposal. But I also didn't understand their statement about the 10% of classrooms, I guess, that have less fenestration than required, and that the proposal, I guess, solved that problem, but it didn't seem that it did because they sort of used the same shading to show that a classroom didn't have I guess, legal light. So wasn't very clear as to how their proposal then solved the problem. And maybe I just read it wrong, but if they could explain that to me, that would be great. And yeah, just a better explanation as to why they need the space that they need. There's just some holes.
Well, I think in the beginning, they should address the issue of the current building actually serves 1,000 college students. So for me, they have to start off by just saying why a building that can serve 1,000 college students is not adequate for 400 students. And they could probably justify that by talking about, adult space needs versus, juvenile space needs. And then they can put that issue to bed. They should clarify how much space is actually being recaptured on the 6th floor from the courtyard, because that wasn't clear to me, even though I was like shifting back and forth between the statement and the plans.
Is being captured by the?
Is being
lost.
recaptured from, well, they're taking the courtyard, cutting it out, and they're putting space up on 6. So that's what I mean, they should clarify the square footage that's coming out and then coming back on.
But they're asking for a floor area increase anyway, right?
Right, yeah, I just want to know
Yeah.
numbers,
Okay.
that's all. They talk about, for their food stores, they talk about how the young people will be eating in their classrooms and that the food refuse will be collected and stored in the cellar refuse area. Is that refrigerated? And also they discuss that they're going to be interior composting areas. They don't say where those areas are and whether or not those areas are going to be refrigerated. I sure hope they're refrigerated. And then when they do talk about the benchmark periodicals or documents that they use, it's not clear whether or not those are actually official requirements. One of them seems like it may even be an article. It says National Science Teachers Association Article, April 2014. So it'd be nice if they talk about those source materials and whether or not they're actually official requirement documents that are driving this space.
Good.
Let's see. I thought the design was actually pretty sensitive in terms of the neighborhood character. I was a little concerned about the HVAC units, which project well above the parapet. And I thought that the rooftop play area keeps looking like this huge, massive black structure on the roof in all of the elevations, and if they could give some information about, what are they actually going to use, because it looks like it provides a lot of bulk.
But it really needs to be just rendered better. It makes
I
it
think
look like
so,
it's
yeah.
an actual
Well,
enclosure.
unless they're planning on something very big and black and massive, because that's the way it looks on the drawings. But other than that, I actually thought that it was pretty well explained, and, how they're, filling in the mezzanines to create more interior space, and actually, the enlargement is like, a couple of thousand square feet.
Right.
And it's set back, and I thought that was pretty sensitive.
No, I agree. And the planning, obviously, there's so many mezzanines in this building, so it's not an efficient use of the interior envelope. So it makes sense that you fill in the mezzanines.
Right.
And all I can think of is the college, 1,000 students don't attend college at one time. There, night programs, day programs, all that stuff. So, okay.
This concludes the April 27th public review session for the Board of Standards and Appeals. Mike's off.